It seems like the NFL season just started, but believe it or not, we are about a third of the way through the year, and we're at a point where teams are not mathematically eliminated from the postseason, of course, but in a lot of ways done pertaining to their chances of winning the Super Bowl this year. And whenever we get to this point in the season, teams are looking to improve their roster to give them a better chance at winning the Super Bowl. And that, of course, is done by trading for other veteran players before the trade deadline. And the 2025 NFL trade deadline is November 4th, and that'll be here before you know it. And in today's video, we're going to break down several players who could get traded before the deadline on November 4th. These are intended to be realistic, so we're not going to project an in-division trade of something like Jamar Chase going to the Steelers so that the Steelers could pursue a 7th ring while also trading for a 25-year-old superstar to a division rival. We'll also break down why it makes sense for both sides and the impact the player would have on their new team. And with those prefaces out of the way, let's begin. And we are starting today's video with Jets running back Breece Hall going to the Kansas City Chiefs. Breece Hall going to the Chiefs would make a lot of sense for both sides for a few reasons. The Jets are the last winless team in the NFL, and their season, again, while not mathematically over, it is in a lot of ways over, and why this trade makes sense for both sides is pretty clear. Breece Hall is in the final year of his contract and will be 25 years old at the start of the 2026 season, and he's had two 1,300 plus total yard seasons for the Jets since being a second round pick back in 2022 out of Iowa State. And with Breece specifically, while I think he is a talented back, the biggest thing to remember here is he was not a Darren Muji selection. Darren Muji is, of course, the Jets general manager, and a lot of the time when it comes to players getting moved at the deadline, especially players on expiring rookie contracts, well, they're usually on a bad team, and because they're on expiring rookie contracts, meaning the 4th year of their deal, more often than not, the team has usually been bad for a year or two, and the regime who drafted them, in this case Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, are no longer there. So from a business standpoint, Jets GM Darren Muji has no ties to Breece Hall, and whether Aaron Glenn is going to be one and done or maybe not even make it a full season is another conversation, and I think there is a decent chance Aaron Glenn is not back for 2026. I would be shocked if the Jets also fire GM Darren Muji too, largely because he inherited a mess to begin with. He inherited a team that was financially constricted due to decisions made before him, like having $41 million in dead money from Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, Tyler Conklin, and Mike Williams before he could even bring his guys in. Now, he did make the decision to release Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, but I don't think the Jets were going to win the Super Bowl with those guys on the roster in 2025. And now the Jets have to pay the cost from a dead cap standpoint, which again limits what Darren Muji could have done in his first offseason with the team. And how this ties back in with Breece Hall is, I don't think the Jets are a player or two away from seriously competing for a Super Bowl. And by the time Breece would sign a contract extension, he would probably be 26 or 27 before this team really started competing to the point where they could be in big playoff games, maybe even older. And given the Chiefs are in a Super Bowl window and have looked a lot better over the past few weeks as a whole, it makes a lot of sense for them to make this trade. And through 6 weeks, Patrick Mahomes is still the leading rusher for this team. Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt haven't exactly been great in 2025, and Kareem Hunt is 30 years old and was drafted all the way back in 2017. So needless to say, he's getting up there, and this trade would benefit both sides. From a trade value standpoint, I think it would cost around a 4th or 5th round pick, and if I personally were Darren Muji, I wouldn't accept less than a 4th because, again, Breece is just 24 years old, and you could franchise tag him at the end of the season if worse came to worst. He's not 28 and is still a really good player. The Texans or Chargers also make a lot of sense for Breece Hall, as the Texans' backfield situation has been a mess all year, though rookie Woody Marks did have one good game against the Titans, so I think that's worth noting, but it's also worth noting that despite Breece Hall being in his 4th season, he's actually 6 months younger than Woody Marks. So this trade also makes a lot of sense for the Texans, as they're in a much better situation than the Jets are, and if they trade for Breece, they could have their guy for the next 2 or 3 years, all for the presumable cost of a 4th round pick. The Chargers trade would be simply because they lost Najee Harris for the year and would split the load with Omarion Hampton when he comes back from injury. And I don't think the Chargers would intend to sign Breece long-term due to the pick they just invested in Omarion Hampton, but admittedly, I really love the idea of Hampton and Hall in the same backfield. But if I had to rank the outcomes of these happening, I think it would be Kansas City, Houston, and the Chargers in that order. But first, if you're looking for a mattress designed to help improve your sleep, your quality of life, and is also conveniently shipped to your front door for free within the United States, look no further than today's sponsor, Bear Mattress. And make sure to head to bearmattress.com/analysis and use code analysis to get 40% off your mattress, and that's actually what's better than what is currently being offered on the website. Bear is a premium fiberglass-free mattress designed to upgrade your sleep quality, and again, it's conveniently shipped to your front door for free within the United States. Bear Mattress has been a recurring partner of the channel now, which I'm very grateful for, but I will admit that whenever Bear was brought to me, I was a little nervous about the idea of working with a mattress company when a mattress is shipped to your front door, specifically because I couldn't go try it out in store, but there's a couple of reasons as to why I really like working with Bear. The first is the sleep quiz. They have a sleep quiz specifically designed on their site to help you choose what mattress fits best for you. Whether you sleep hot, you sleep cold, whether you're a side sleeper, a back sleeper, a stomach sleeper, whatever the case may be, the sleep quiz is designed to help you pick out the mattress that's best for you. And they also have financing options, or flexible financing options, and you can get up to a 120-night sleep-free trial. So if you ordered now, you would have until after New Year's to be able to determine whether or not Bear Mattress is a good fit for you. Now, we did mention the sleep quiz, and one of the biggest reasons why I like the sleep quiz is it helps eliminate the guesswork. And again, that was one of my biggest question marks about working with Bear, was the fact that a mattress is going to show up on your doorstep without ever trying it. But it'll ask you several questions and what type of firmness you like, and I'm personally a medium firmness kind of guy, and they matched me with the Elite Hybrid Medium. And myself and Meadow are very happy Bear Mattress customers, and especially Meadow. Let me tell you, she really loves the Bear Mattress. But if you don't believe myself or Meadow, well, Bear just ran a survey in over 300 recent customers, where 82% said they saw an increase in quality of sleep with their new Bear Mattress, which is also why 95% of their customers said they would recommend Bear Mattress to a friend. And I love my Bear Mattress, and I think you would too. And right now, if you head to bearmattress.com/analysis and use code analysis, you'll receive 40% off your mattress, which is again better than what's currently being offered on the site. Once again, that's bearmattress.com/analysis using code analysis for 40% off. And a big thank you to Bear Mattress for sponsoring today's video. Now, in today's video, we're obviously discussing players that could be traded before the November 4th trade deadline, but there's two players that I think that we have to mention that are going to be in trade discussions that you're going to see on Twitter about, hey, this team is going to make an offer for X or Y player, but I don't think there's any way that Alvin Kamara of the Saints gets traded at this point, and if I were the Saints, I wouldn't either. There was a conversation a couple of years ago about Alvin Kamara around the 2022 trade deadline going to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, whose running back core was led by Miles Sanders that year, and I think there's a conversation to be had that if Alvin Kamara at 27 years old is on the 2022 Eagles, that maybe they win the Super Bowl that year. Obviously, that's hindsight, but now that Alvin Kamara is 30 years old, and there was even a quote from Alvin directly this week that basically said he does not want to be anywhere but New Orleans, I don't think the Saints are going to trade him, and you would also have to question the value that they would even receive at this point, because not only would you be trading a player that Saints fans have loved for near a decade at this point, as Alvin was drafted all the way back in 2017, but he has over 2,200 career touches, and he is a running back, so obviously the value you're going to receive naturally is not going to be a lot, let alone for a player in his 9th NFL season. And then you also have to factor in how much the city of New Orleans loves Alvin Kamara, and then of course how much Alvin himself loves the city of New Orleans. So I think that would be pretty bad business by Mickey Loomis to do this trade, especially when Alvin Kamara has said how much he loves the team and city. So I don't think Alvin Kamara will get traded by November 4th. And the second player is Eagles receiver A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, from a talent standpoint, is undoubtedly one of the best receivers in the league. Not getting into rankings, but we can all agree that A.J. Brown is a very, very talented player, and it makes no sense for the Eagles to trade a 28-year-old receiver in his prime, especially if they were to trade A.J. They would accrue a $43 million dead cap hit in 2026 that they cannot get out of. The contract situation does not work and basically say, hey, we're the New England Patriots, we want A.J. Brown to come play with Drake May so that we can have A.J. Brown and Stephon Diggs, and we'll take the $43 million dead cap hit so that you guys don't have to, so that you can comfortably trade him. The money does not work out like that, especially for a signing bonus that was already paid. So the Eagles and Howie Roseman obviously are not dumb. There's a reason they are contenders year in and year out, and aside from having one of the best rosters in the NFL, and I know the 2025 Eagles season has not gone particularly well so far, but there's a reason that they are a well-run organization from the top down, and they're not going to willingly take a $43 million dead cap hit by trading A.J. Brown just because he's a little disgruntled at this time. Now, earlier we did discuss why I don't think it would be smart for the Saints to trade Alvin Kamara, and honestly what it boils down to is this is a 30-year-old running back. You are not going to receive a lot of trade value for a 30-year-old running back, and it's also a double whammy that Alvin Kamara is a Saints icon and one of the best players to play for this franchise ever. So if you would trade Alvin Kamara and a 6th-round pick in exchange for a 5th-round pick, to me, the value would not be there, and I don't think that that would be a good process by the Saints, considering what the public pushback would be for one of the best players to ever play for this franchise. But the same does not apply to receiver Chris Olave. Olave was a 1st-round pick back in 2022, and unfortunately, Chris Olave has had a concussion history, and this is why the Olave discussion is very complicated, both from the Saints potentially paying Chris Olave this offseason and trading him before the November 4th deadline. If there was a team to trade for Chris Olave, actually 2 teams, I think they would both be in the AFC East, and they are the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. Now, even within the Chris Olave discussion, there's several points to be had from both sides. Obviously, if you are a team like the Bills or Patriots trading for Chris Olave, you also have to factor in that there's a concussion history with Chris Olave, and that will inevitably bring his trade value down because they're not going to say to Mickey Loomis basically, hey, Chris Olave's had 1,000 yards multiple times in his career, will you take a 1st-round pick? The conversation is not going to go that way. It's going to be downplayed the other way and say, hey, this is a player with a known injury history, so why would we give up significant draft capital when there's receivers like Carnell Tate or Mekhi Lemon coming out in the 2026 draft? And there's also other great receivers coming out too, but you get the point of what I'm saying. So within this, there's also the Saints side to basically say, hey, Chris Olave has been a good player for us when he's been in the field, and earlier in the 2025 NFL season, there was a very toxic discussion on Twitter about hospital balls, and the hospital balls crowd basically insinuated that anytime a pass is thrown over the middle that it's a hospital ball, and that's certainly not the case. You can throw passes over the middle without them being hospital balls. But anyway, what I will say about Chris Olave specifically, because the hospital ball discussion was extremely toxic, but with Chris Olave, I don't think he's necessarily injury prone, but the plays that he was injured on that were quarterbacked by Derek Carr were by every definition hospital passes, and whether that receiver was Chris Olave or a big receiver who has a lot more height and weight on him like DK Metcalf, I don't think DK would have walked away from those plays unscathed and basically said, hey, I'm a tough guy, throw me more passes like that, where I'm getting drilled because I'm being led into a safety getting ready to just come from 10 yards back and smack me across the middle. So I don't think this is a conversation of Chris Olave being injury prone. Unfortunately, that will be brought up, but within this, there's going to be a discussion of what his actual value is, and I think it would be around a 2nd-round pick for probably a 4th in Chris Olave, and I don't know if the Saints would be willing to trade Chris Olave for that, especially now because they have Spencer Rattler, who, credit where it's due, is playing really good football, and you even saw the Rattler to Olave connection in the Week 6 game against the Patriots on the very first play of the game when he hit Olave on a 53-yard pass. So there's a lot of conversations to be had with Chris Olave specifically, and I think he's undoubtedly one of the more complicated conversations across the NFL right now in terms of trade value, because if you are trading for Chris Olave, you have to factor in the injury history as well as the pending contract extension and all of the complicated discussions within the contract extension due to his injury history. David Njoku of the Browns is up, and the Browns are in a very weird situation because they're in a situation where, in theory, they should trade players to get draft picks, but you also have to remember the human element to this, and that is if GM Andrew Berry is fired at season's end, or even in jeopardy of being fired, whether he were to receive 3 first-round picks for David Njoku or not, and obviously he would not receive that, it wouldn't matter because he wouldn't be around to make the picks anyway. There would not be a gentleman's agreement or handshake of, hey, let's do what's best for the franchise in the long run and to help the guy who is going to replace me out. And the reason we bring this up is because the Browns are in a good position to do a big fire sale and trade guys like Njoku and at least shop Myles Garrett, Joel Bitonio, and Jerry Jeudy, and honestly the Jets are too, especially with a first-year GM, but anyways, I don't think Cleveland will do a big fire sale. However, the one player I could see being traded is tight end David Njoku, and the reason I could see him being traded is they just just spent a third-round pick on rookie Harold Fannin, and Harold looks like he can be a good long-term starter for the Browns, and I'm not just saying that just to say it. He's currently leading the team in receptions and receiving yards through 6 games, and we've talked about how difficult it is to transition to the NFL level at the tight end position, because you not only have to run good routes and get open, but you also have to block big guys in the trenches too, and that's a lot easier said than done. And admittedly, Fannin is not your typical blocking tight end, and he is only 21 years old, so I'm not surprised to see him struggle in that part of his game early on, but this is a perfect time to part ways with David Njoku. Later in the year, probably in the mid-November area, we'll do a video discussing the best draft classes from the 2025 draft so far, and the Browns will probably be in there. And I loved what they did in April, and Fannin was a big part of that. Now, unfortunately, there is one player that has not played that rules the 2025 draft conversation for the Browns, but I thought Andrew Berry did a good job of bringing in talented players like Carson Schlesinger, Quinshon Judkins, and Harold Fannin. And this is why I think it makes a lot of sense to trade Njoku specifically. They have a player at the position who can take over, and Njoku is 29 years old. And the Browns are not a good team at this point, and they're several positions away. And we recently heard Myles Garrett talk about how frustrating it is that the offense isn't putting up points consistently, and for anyone who may not know, the Browns have not put up more than 17 points in a game since the infamous Monday night game last year in Denver, in which they lost 41-32, and Jerry Jeudy had 235 yards receiving. And I think at this point, the Chargers make a lot of sense for David Njoku because their leading tight end in receiving yards is rookie Oronde Gadsden, and while I think Gadsden can be a good player for the Bolts over the course of the next few years, I think even Chargers fans would agree that Njoku gives this team a better chance to win right now than Gadsden as a rookie, although credit to Gadsden for having the game he did against Miami, a big shout out to him for that. But from a contract standpoint, this is David Njoku's last year on his deal, so I would be shocked if it costs anything more than a fifth, and honestly it may even be a fifth for David Njoku and a sixth in return. And the reason I think the return for him specifically would be so low is other teams obviously know the Browns have Harold Fannin on the roster and would not overpay for him. And there probably also wouldn't be a huge market for him either because a lot of good teams in the NFL, though certainly not all, have good tight ends already on the roster. And given the Chargers internally believe they are contending for a Super Bowl, I think this makes a lot of sense for both sides. Now, we've discussed a lot of offensive trades so far throughout the video, but one defensive trade that I think makes a lot of sense is Trey Hendrickson going to the Colts. And why I think this makes a lot of sense is the Colts unfortunately have sustained a lot of injuries in the defensive backfield so far, whether it was third-round pick Justin Wally going down for the year with a torn ACL, or Hunter Waller going down for the year as well, or even Mike Hilton or Jalen Jones. They've dealt with their fair share of injuries in the secondary, and if the 2024 Eagles proved anything, it's that a good pass rush and good front four can help negate a lot of things in the back end of the defense. Now, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean obviously had great years last year, and Cooper DeJean obviously had the pick 6 against Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, but if you have a pass rush with Trey Hendrickson, Laiatu Latu, who is currently leading the team in pressures, and DeForest Buckner, that's going to help you out with your back end of your team, even if they are down a couple of players as well. So I really like the idea of Trey Hendrickson going to the Colts at this point, and the Colts in some ways are kind of playing with house money because there was a lot of talk about Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, from myself especially, heading into the year about them being on the hot seat, and I've said multiple times how wrong I was about Daniel Jones heading into the year, so again, credit where it's due to Daniel Jones, but in a lot of ways they're playing with house money because nobody expected the Colts to be this good this year, at least 6 games in, and if there is one thing we can agree on about the 2025 NFL season so far, it's that it's anybody's game. So if you are in a position to be able to go after a player like Trey Hendrickson, who is seemingly always in contract disputes with the Cincinnati Bengals, why not go after it? Why not go after him and try and bolster your pass rush as you make an unlikely run towards a Super Bowl title? And if anybody is definitively saying right now they know how it's going to play out, I'm sorry, but they're lying. This is as wide open as it can possibly get, so go out, get yourself a really good pass rusher, pay him for another year or two, whatever the case may be, go out and try and get Trey Hendrickson and pair him with Laiatu Latu, who has taken a step so far in 2025, and DeForest Buckner, and go make it happen. Next up is a reasonable reaction to the Monday night game between Atlanta and Buffalo, and it's to trade Josh Allen to tear it down and completely start over. jokes aside, it's Max Crosby going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Eagles have had their struggles offensively this year in 2025, and that's an understatement, but they've also had a lot of trouble getting after the quarterback, especially from the edge position. And right now, Jalen Hunt is the leader in pressures on this team with 16 from the edge rushers, and I don't think that they have enough juice to be able to get the job done and to be anywhere close to the team that they were last year, at least from a pass rushing standpoint. Now, it certainly doesn't help the fact that Nolan Smith is on IR at the moment and he's still out a couple of games, but to have Zadarius Smith retire midway through the season, that obviously isn't going to help the situation with a position that you're already thin at. And we do know the Eagles were in the Micah Parsons trade conversations, and the Cowboys, understandably so, did not want to trade Micah Parsons within the division, but trading for Max Crosby makes a lot of sense for both sides. Right now, the Las Vegas Raiders are not a player or two away from seriously competing. This is a bad football team. They are several players away. Now, there is a conversation that basically says, hey, we don't want to trade one of the good players we have. Why would we trade one of the good players we have? But again, I go back to the fact that you're not a player or two away. John Spytek, the general manager, knows this. He saw firsthand what Jason Licht has built over the past 10 years in Tampa and why Tampa is a contender year in and year out, and it's continuously building through the draft. Max Crosby is also 28 years old, and I think there's a very real conversation to have of, hey, if we have a couple of good drafts, we're still probably not going to be Super Bowl contenders in 2026 or 2027, so let's trade a 28-year-old player in their prime so that we can have multiple first-round picks, because that's what I do think it would take to bring in Max Crosby. And if Howie Roseman is willing to pay 2 first-round picks for that type of player, that is the start to the rebuild that the Las Vegas Raiders need, because again, and I will hammer this point home again, they are not a player or two away from legitimately competing for a Super Bowl. And I know Max Crosby signed a big contract extension this past offseason, so there's probably some people wondering, well, if we brought up the A.J. Brown contract and why the Birds can't trade him because of the dead money that they would accrue with the A.J. Brown trade, wouldn't that also apply to the Raiders? Why would I suggest this if the Raiders would also eat $40 million in dead money? And they wouldn't. The Raiders, if they were to trade Max Crosby per over the cap, would only eat $5 million in dead money for the 2026 season, so they would be good to be able to make this trade happen, and they wouldn't hurt for a year or two and basically limit themselves by also trading their best player on top of it. So this is a rare situation where a team that desperately needs pass rush help that you can make a case for, even though they've had their struggles, that they could go back to back, could also significantly improve the roster and have Max Crosby and Jalen Carter get after the quarterback and potentially win their 3rd Super Bowl in the last 10 years. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe as it helps the channel tremendously, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Thank you to Bear Mattress for sponsoring today's video, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.